It's a real pleasure to be here with business owners. This is sort of my ideal group. I love working with entrepreneurs, their spirit, their passion, their optimism. It's also an honor to be speaking at the University Club. I consulted the history of the University Club and on the club's website and found out that previous speakers have included Albert Einstein and Albert Michelson being the first individual to measure the speed of light and win a Nobel Prize in Science from the U.S. Einstein, of course, is most famous for his theory of relativity. And he was one time asked to explain it, and he said, well, the best explanation I can give you is this. If you were courting a very nice girl, 1 hour with her seemed like a second. If you sit on a red-hot cinder, 1 second seemed like an hour. Now, I can't promise you that this session is going to go by like a second, but I hope it will not go so slow that you can't wait for it to end. So, and in the process, I hope to shed some light on the subject. So, keeping yourself and your firm healthy, principally for entrepreneurs and owners of privately held businesses, and the operating assumption which I work from is that the privately held firm exists for the benefit of the owner or owners, much like a publicly held company exists for the benefit of the stockholders. This is not to say there aren't other obligations and not other stakeholders, but fundamentally that is the main operating assumption that I'm going to come back to numerous times during the presentation. To give you, I don't know how many of you watched the Olympics, the Sochi Olympics, Winter Olympics, but my favorite event is one which I want to share with you. It's actually a Cadillac commercial. And it sort of personifies, dramatizes so well in 30 seconds in a brilliant way a picture of the entrepreneur as I've experienced such a person. So let me call this up real quick.
Why do we work so hard? For what? For this? For stuff? Other countries, they work, they stroll home, they stop by the cafe, they take August off. Off. Why aren't you like that? Why aren't we like that? Because we're crazy, driven, hard-working believers, that's why. Those other countries think we're nuts. Whatever. Were the Wright brothers insane? Bill Gates, Les Paul, Ali. Were we nuts when we pointed to the moon? That's right. We went up there, and you know what we got? Bored. So we left. Got a car up there, left the keys in it. Do you know why? Because we're the only ones going back up there, that's why. But I digress. It's pretty simple. You work hard, you create your own luck, and you gotta believe anything is possible. As for all the stuff, that's the upside of only taking 2 weeks off in August. N'est-ce pas?
I mean, you gotta love this guy. At least this is one reason why I love working with entrepreneurs. What I'm going to really focus on this morning is the fact that there are certain core beliefs and traits that entrepreneurs have that seem to be essential to their success. And some of those you'll notice were actually in this commercial. I didn't design the presentation after I heard the commercial, but many of the phrases, many of the ways of thinking are embodied in that short dramatization. And my thesis is that these same beliefs and traits necessary for entrepreneurial success are the same ones that can undo that success if they're not re-examined and, you might say, reconfigured in certain ways. The first of these is that the entrepreneur is confident. I mean, this guy in the commercial, he exudes confidence. He's succeeded in the past, and he plans to do so in the future. There's not at all daunted by challenges. Secondly, he, the entrepreneur, or she, has control of their own destiny. In fact, that's one of the things he said as he was getting into the car. We make our own, I'm not sure exactly the phrase, but basically we make our own reality. Thirdly, I know what's needed in order to succeed. I'm insightful. I can read situations, I can read people, I can read possibilities. I have tremendous insight. Thirdly, or not thirdly, it'd be actually fourthly, independent. Don't want to be controlled. You can see from the drama, this guy is not somebody who would like to be told what to do. He tells life what to do. Optimistic, the future holds many opportunities, and I have observed that most entrepreneurs are very generous. Now, none of these apply 100% to every entrepreneur, but generosity seems to also characterize them. And I'll come back to that a little later. So, while these are essential to success, if carried to an extreme, they'll undo that success. Actually, executive turnover in entrepreneurial firms, in my experience, is pretty high. First of all, the individual coming from the publicly held company doesn't quite know what he's getting into. I mean, I know this literally, that you have executives who have had budgets of $500,000, and they come to work for the entrepreneurial firm, and they get a call to come see the president, and they went, oh, I wonder what's going on. He's saying, I just got this check for, you wrote a check for, I approved a purchase for $500. What's this for? What? So that kind of control they're not used to. And it's usually not discussed in the interview either. The other thing is that there are an awful lot of executives, I don't mean to touch on personal areas, there are an awful lot of executives who are very, very well coached in getting a job. And many entrepreneurs are easy touches for that kind of sales job. But there are many, while they're very often very well coached on how to get a job, they're often not nearly as well coached on how to do the job. And so executive selection becomes a major, it's a major area in which I have continue to help clients. The CEO is very generous. And if they fit the general profile, the executives don't seem particularly grateful. Oh, big deal. Well, I guess you needed to do this, otherwise you wouldn't do it. And so the president gives awards, gives surprise kinds of awards, does spending a lot of money, and literally sometimes they don't even get a thank you. As astounding as that may seem, I've seen it happen. So what happens is that the executives, the founders' core beliefs and attitudes are challenged. And there is really in life little that is more traumatic, more upsetting than having your core beliefs and outlook on the world deeply challenged. All of a sudden, what you have based your life on, your career on, your future on, is called into question. All of a sudden, you don't control your own destiny fully. You're dependent upon a bunch of other people who have all of these esoteric specialties that you can't even quite understand. I don't even get it, especially when it comes to IT. It's seen so often, the other executives call the IT head into the room and say, so what are you doing? Why do you need this money? And he or she begins an explanation, none of which anybody really understands. And they say, okay, well, thank you very much. That's helpful. And when he leaves, I guess he knows what he's talking about. I mean, what choice do we have? And then you wait and see whether it'll work out or it doesn't. If it doesn't work out, you say, we're next. And that's one reason why I think the average tenure of a CIO in corporate America is about 2 years. And I think in part it's because it's not just a thing, there are disappointments. There are disappointments in every area all the time. It's that I don't even understand what he's talking about. So the next well-coached applicant comes along and says, that's who we need. So I I'm the founder. I no longer know what's the best thing to do. Other people seem to know better than I. I don't like this. And if I'm optimistic, that can lead to overcommitment. I'm trying to do too much. People are overloaded. Some projects fail. Some languish in the IT queue for a year and a half, or until that CIO leaves, and then you go through his drawer, you find all of these projects that have been forgotten for 18 months that the future of the company is depending upon. And this confidence, unfortunately, can also lead to a resistance to feedback. If I want to know what needs to be done, if I've created this firm, if I'm successful, insightful, and all the rest of it, why do I want to hear from you? What do you know about founding and running a company? And all of your leadership ideas, yeah, they might be great with a Fortune 500 or Fortune 100. That's not what we are. So thanks for the feedback, but keep it to yourself from now on. Let's get to work. So the results are, if in a burst of, you might say, control energy, this founder tries to reassert too much command and control, it leads to executive turnover. And also you can have the direct reports operating in tunnel vision. Those of you who have known me for some time know that I'm a private pilot, and I used to do a lot of recreational flying, including some aerobatic flying. And in that process, I did some research on aviation safety, so that my landings would be equal to my takeoffs. And what I found out is that the worst enemy in the cockpit is not a fire or an engine failure or any of those things. The worst enemy in the cockpit is panic. And when people are under excessive command and control, with punishments and rewards being the main motivators, they tend to operate in tunnel vision and panic. I say tunnel vision because research shows that when a pilot gets into panic mode, he or she literally cannot see some of the instruments. The vision becomes tunneled. So if you have one instrument that's malfunctioning and it contradicts another instrument, and there's a third one which would resolve the contradiction, but you literally can't see it, that's a formula for disaster. And it's the same thing within an organization. In tunnel vision, panic mode, there are things that aren't seen, that aren't addressed. And then we can master any challenges. Well, one of the things you're going to find out as an entrepreneur when you hire people is that they do some really stupid things, and they do some really unethical things, and you just can't figure it out. I mean, who could figure out Bernie Madoff? The guy's rotting in prison. He's probably got more people than there are in this room who'd like to just kill him. And he could have been a financial genius and a great success. The disaster of the 2008 collapse, I mean, with all the bright financial minds we have in this country, how did that happen? And one of the things which happens when you're disappointed in the firm and you own it is to immediately enact policies and rules and procedures to keep that from ever happening again. And the fact is, you cannot possibly create, in my opinion, enough policies, rules, and procedures to prevent the faults and the misdeeds of human beings. And if you do, you create so many rules that you make things worse. I don't want to get into politics, but that is the argument against the excessively regulated state. We can regulate it to the point that we won't ever have any problems, we won't ever have any successes either. So most entrepreneurs probably are of the opinion that the government's role is to get out of the way and let people use their creativity to create wealth. What they sometimes overlook is that within their own company, they are the government. And they need to get out of people's way and let them succeed. It gets to the point about strategic planning. The privately held business essentially belongs to the family. There are some heirs who would get it if the entrepreneur were to depart this world this day. If married, there are community property laws. And in many cases, the business, I have found, is the glue which holds the family together. You have very often in privately held businesses, people in extended family relations that typically don't communicate that much at all in other settings. So I think that it's, in one sense, is missing the point to do strategic planning in the privately held business and not address the question, what does this business mean to the family, and what does the family want to have come out of this business? What role does it play for us, and what role will it play in the future? I talked about entrepreneurs being generous. You know, when Kingston Technology in Fontana, back in the mid-90s, they sold their company to a Japanese buyer for $1.5 billion. And then they set aside $100 million for the employees as a sign of their generosity. It wasn't to increase performance. The performance was done as far as they were concerned. They were out of there, got $1.5 billion. It's one of those examples which is two birds with one stone. A few years later, they bought it back for about $425 million, 80% of the company. So the buyer really had destroyed value by buying it by the acquisition, and the generous founders were able to get it back for about a third of what they had received. Pretty good deal. Also, important to keep in mind too that the guy in the commercial says we're driven. Well, if you're driven, you're not driving. You're in the back seat, or maybe the trunk. If you're in zone 5. What that means, what are you driven by? Well, you're driven by impulses, you're driven by rash decisions, you're driven by some kind of ego or what other people want you to do or be, living up to some image, instead of making sound decisions where you are in charge of your life and in charge of your business. So the sense of being passionate and committed and resolute is one thing. Being driven, I don't, I know it's sort of meant in a boastful way in that commercial. I don't think it's a boast. When it comes to hiring executives, which is a very, very important point, are hiring specialists, in whether they're executives or not. The right ones will not want to be controlled, but they will want to please you. And if you're going to hire well, I think there are 3 criteria: competence, character, and fit. And so often decisions are made simply on the basis of competence. Does this person have the technical skills? Does this person have the professional background to do the job? The answer is yes, okay, you're hired. But there's a question of character. Does the person have good work ethic? Is the person honest? Is the person open? Do they have hidden agendas? I've seen this a number of times too. An executive gets hired and his or her agenda is, I'm going to drive to make this, have this company go public, and I will get equity. And the owners don't want that at all. But that's the hidden agenda. The other thing is fit. It may sound romantic to somebody who has been in a Fortune 500, Fortune 100 to work for a small, scrappy entrepreneur. I mean, this is the character of America. This is, being a part of the economy, the entrepreneurial economy that creates 75 to 85% of the new jobs every year in the country. Wow, I can't wait to be a part of that. But does this person really is willing to roll up his or her sleeves, get dirt under the fingernails, not have a fancy office, not have fancy underground parking, have a very limited budget, be questioned on all expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. I find this to be, I've seen a number of CFOs. It seems to be a kind of a professional risk, you might say, of CFOs of arrogance. Hired into an entrepreneurial firm for their great financial expertise, and quickly think, you know, the people who run this firm are idiots. I could do better than this. Because they understand the finances and how they perhaps they could be structured better, they adopt this condescending, arrogant attitude all too quickly, in my observation. The reality is they probably couldn't start and run a successful lemonade stand on their own. They've never been entrepreneurs themselves. So you've got to make sure you are hiring with the right fit. And this is one of the strengths, I believe, that the family-owned business has. Because fit and character are the hardest things to read from strangers, but with your family, you know that better than you will any stranger who comes and applies. You can get it wrong there too, but you know better. Yes?
In this key phase here, in your experience, is that a good time to use professional help to hire these people?
Well, it sounds self-serving, but yes. I think very often professional recruiters are hired, but my experience is the professional recruiters themselves need to be managed. First of all, they need to be selected. The entrepreneur will sometimes say to a friend, an associate, somebody in a networking group, "Know any good recruiters?" "Oh yeah, what's so-and-so?" And I like networking groups, but I think, and some of you, or many of you are maybe members of one, but I have been burned by myself by referring somebody simply because I knew them from a group. I don't know their competence. I don't know their expertise, their skills. But you get into these groups, and the agreement is I'll recommend you to some of my clients, and you recommend me to some of your clients, but we're in no position to make sound recommendations simply because we have breakfast with somebody once a month. Sorry to say, but if you want a recommendation from your peers in here, let them know what you do. Give them your resume. Ask them to visit LinkedIn. Talk about your accomplishments, so that they can make a sound and do the same thing yourself. Before I recommend you, I need to know more about you, because I'm putting my own credibility on the line. So I think that, first of all, so that applies not only to the executives, but also to the recruiters. And then, often the firm will hire a recruiter and say, well, we need a CFO. Oh, okay. Generic job description, which doesn't apply at all. Run some people through, they're well coached, have a couple of interviews. This is another common practice. Let's have all the rest of the other people, all the rest of the executives interview the CFO candidate, but I won't even ask for their feedback. Happens all the time. Hey, Don, why don't you interview this candidate? Then, next thing Don hears after he had the interview is the guy's been hired. Well, don't you care what I think? Oh, I'm sure it's fine. So, managing that whole process, the screening, it's a long subject, but long-winded, yes. The other thing which I think an entrepreneur needs to do is emphasize the charisma and/or personal influence. This means developing a shared vision. In his book, Good to Great, Collins sort of stands on its head the idea of vision. Typically, it means we develop a vision and then we hire people in to fulfill it. His idea is that you should develop the vision with the new staff.